यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः सुष्ठुवगंशस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति नो इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तक्षरिष्टनेमि स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरि ओम तत्सत्।
Okay, I'm gonna send out the poll and I'll give you guys about like 3 minutes. Okay, two more people. If you guys can't access this, then we can get started and I will. I'm just let Oshir and I know at the end, okay? Okay. We can get started with the Gita then.
Okay, so everyone have their Gitas? If so, let's continue doing the verses from last week. So, can any one of you guys tell me what verse we stopped at last week? Can you guys also turn on your cameras? Because half of you guys don't have your cameras on. Okay, what verse did we stop on last week? Okay, so because no one is answering. Okay, Unmer says 20. Um, so we actually stopped at 30 last time because we did 21 to 30 last week. So um, in this chapter, there's 43 verses, I believe. 43, yeah. So today we'll be doing from verses 31 to 43. So we'll finish off chapter 3. And I hope you guys have been following along because a lot of the stuff that we say, a lot of the stuff we talk about will be on your next test. Guys, don't forget there's another test coming up. We don't know when, but it'll come up. So just making sure that everyone pays attention and is aware. Okay, so how many verses are there in chapter 3? Shauna, tell me.
43.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll finish off chapter 3 today, and then you guys will do slides. And yeah, that's the plan, okay? So let's go to verse 31. Actually, no, before we do that, let's do the dhyanam and the guru pranam. Okay. Would anyone like to do the guru pranam here? Someone that we haven't heard from.
I think Sean wants to do it.
Okay, yeah, Shauna, go ahead.
Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om Akhandamandalakaram Bhaktam Yeno Characharam Tatpadam Darshitang Yeno Tasmai Sri Gurave Namo.
Thank you. Do you want to do dhyanam too?
He says no.
Okay. um, okay, who wants to do the dhyanam? Arshi?
अतः श्रीमद्भगवद्गीताध्ययनं वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, verse 31. I'll read it once, I'll break it apart, and then the third time we do it, we'll read all together, okay? Ye me matamidam nityam anutishtanti manavaha श्रद्धवन्तान् सूयन्तो मुच्छन्ते ते विकर्मभिः ये मे मातामिदं नित्यम् अनुतिष्ठन्ति मानवः श्रद्धवन्तान् सूयन्तो मुच्छन्ते तेऽपि कर्मभिः ये मे मातामिदं नित्यम् अनुतिष्ठन्ति मानवः श्रद्धवन्तान् सूयन्तो मुच्छन्ते तेऽपि कर्मभिः
Okay, so verse 31. Can you guys hear me? Yes, okay. So if we look at the breakdown of the words, sometimes looking at them specifically helps, right? So then you can piece together the meaning of the phrase versus yourself, instead of memorizing, let's say, like 2 to 3 sentences in total, or if you need to go back to it. But some words here are like manava, men, right? That's you guys can see the word manava and be like, oh, that means men, right? And then Shraddhavanta, having faith. And then Anushuyanta, it's free from disparagement. And Nityam is always. Anutishtanti is follow. And then Karmabhi, meaning by or like from karma, right? And Muchanti are released. So Sri Krishna is saying here, whoever follows the teachings of mine, with their minds full of faith and free from disparagement, they also are released from the bondage of karma, right? So if you look at the previous verse, let's see. We ended off with him saying, offer all your actions to me, right? And to Arjuna, he's like, you fight without the slightest touch of hatred or excitement, right? And then to this verse, he says, whoever follows that teaching of mine, right? The offer all your actions, your mind in unison with the spirit and freedom of desires and egotism, you fight without the slightest touch of hatred or excitement. Whoever follows this teaching of Sri Krishna's with faith and free from disparagement, they also are released from the bondage of karma. Okay? Awesome. Does that make sense? Do you guys want me to break it down phrase by phrase, or this is good? It's good? Okay. The next verse it is then. Ye te tadhaphyasuyanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvajnana vimudam stan viddhi nashtana chetasha. Ye te tadhaphyasuyanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvajnana vimudam stan tan viddhi nashta न चेतसा ये ते तदभ्यसूयन्तो नानुतिष्ठन्ति मे मतं सर्वज्ञानविमूढं स्तन् विद्धि नष्ट न चेतसा.
So for this verse, Sri Krishna is talking about the other side of it. So the people who don't listen to the teaching that he talked about in verse 30. So he says yetu, but whoever, matam, teaching, abhyasuyanta, disparaging, na onutishtanti, do not follow, achetasa, senseless, sarvajnana, vimudan, blind to all wisdom, vidhinashtan, known as lost. So here Sri Krishna is saying that those who disparage or those who don't follow this doctrine of mine and discard it, know such senseless men, blind to all wisdom, as lost. So the people that don't follow this idea of offering all actions with no attachment and just free from desires and egotism, they're blind to this wisdom and they're considered as people who are lost. Okay? So we'll move on to verse 33. Okay. Sadrisham cheshtate swasya prakritir jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Sadrisham cheshtate swasya prakritir jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyasi. Sadrisham cheshtate swasya प्रकृतिर्ज्ञानवानपि प्रकृतिं यन्ति भूतानि निग्रह किं करिष्यति.
Okay. So, some words that would be helpful to keep in mind here are Gyanavanapi, okay, meaning a wise man. And then, Swashya is like of his own. Prakriti is nature, as we have heard many times in the past. Sadrisham is in accordance with, okay, and Cheshtati is to act. And you see, once again, Prakritim is another way of saying nature, but like grammatically, you say it this way in here. And then Nigraha is repression, and Karishyati is will do, okay? And so in total, here it says, even a wise man acts in accordance with his nature. All beings follow their nature. What can repression do, right? So if we look at it part by part, it's like everyone acts according to their own nature, their own prakriti, right? So if we think about it, every person has an innate like disposition, right? Formed by their qualities, like the gunas, their past samskaras, right? And their tendencies. So even someone who is wise and knowledgeable, right? They still have these tendencies. And then Sri Krishna says, so if even if someone understands what is right intellectually, right, their deep conditioning will influence them, right? And then so here it says this verse kind of explains that knowledge does not like instantly override one's own nature, innate nature. And then he says about repression is like simply forcing yourself to kind of suppress these desires or tendencies does not solve the problems. Does that make sense? So you can kind of think about that. So Krishna's trying to imply that Arjuna's nature as a warrior, as a Kshatriya, is going to push him to do action, right? But instead of trying to repress that nature completely, like that will not work. Does that make sense? So even if you try to suppress your innate tendencies somewhere in some form, your human like your nature, some scars will push you to do things that are in accordance with your own nature. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Next verse. Okay. These are long words, but you'll you'll see when I chant it, okay? Indriya shindriya sharte ragadeshu vyavastito tayurna vasamagachet to hisya paripantino. Indriya shindriya sharte ragadeshu vyavastito tayurna vasamagachet to hisya paripantino. Indriya-shindriya-sharte ragatveषु vyavastito tayornavasamagachet tohyasya paripantino.
So in this verse, Sri Krishna continues on from the previous verse where he talks about how it's normal for your mind and all of like these different organs to feel attraction or aversion. So let's break up the words and then we'll look over the meaning. So indriyasya, of the senses, indriyashyarthe, in the object of the senses, raga desho, attachment and aversion, vyavasthito, are naturally established. Tayo, of them, vasham, sway, na agachet, let not come, though they, asya, his, paripantino, enemies. So here it says, it is natural for each organ to feel attraction or aversion in respective objects pertaining to each sense. Do not come under their sway, for they are enemies of all spiritual aspirants. Okay, so when you think about, so there are a few things you can think about when you look at this verse. So, have you guys ever closed your eyes, like before you've studied, right? Like you're constantly distracted by the world, and you're like, okay, now I need to like actually lock in, like I need to do my work, you know? So you close your eyes and you just like sit there and you're just trying to like plan everything out. Have you ever noticed how your mind goes from one thing to another thing to another thing in like the span of seconds, right? So that's kind of like it's normal that our mind does that. That's kind of the reality of our mind. That's natural because like Adrita said, each person has some sort of like nature, some sort of prakriti that they come off of, like their character, whatever that they do. So a lot of the time what we tend to be attracted to, what we tend to desire is all based on that prakriti and that nature. So it's natural, it happens. So Sri Krishna's reassuring Arjuna and also us that that's natural. It's normal that it happens, but it's the way that we react to it that's the most important thing. And how we react to it is that we just let it pass. Like we don't get controlled by those kinds of thoughts, those kinds of actions, desires, all of that. So like you know how like we have the six like Shat Champutis? So we also have six enemies. Do you guys know what the enemies are? We've talked about it before. Six enemies, guys. The first one is calm. Kama. Then what's the next one?
Rhoda,
Mm-hmm. And then?
Lobh,
Uh-huh. There's a few more.
Moha.
Mm-hmm.
Matha,
Okay, and then?
Maturja.
Yeah, exactly. So we have our six treasures and then we have our six enemies, right? So our job here is to not follow our enemies, right? We're supposed to manifest like the six treasures that we have. So in this case, Sri Krishna like he like considers the idea that we do have enemies because technically they are our enemies. They're based on like the side of Prakriti that like we don't want to follow. So here Sri Krishna is saying that yeah, it's natural that you might feel desire, you might feel this way, you might be emotional or like you might be sad or you might follow your feelings, but the main takeaway from this verse is that you don't follow through with them, you just let them pass because those are technically temporary. That's Prakriti. It's constantly changing. Okay? So we can go to verse 35 now. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharmat shanushritat swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharma bhayavaha. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharmat shanushritat swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharma bhayavaha. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharma sanushritat swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharma bhayavaha.
Okay, very interesting verse. So if we look at here, so first of all, we're talking about two duties here, right? Paradharma and and swadharma, right? So swadharma is your own duty, right? Or in accordance to one's duty. And then paradharma is the the duty of another, right? And then some other words to pay attention to would be swanostita is like well performed, viguna imperfect, and then nidhanam would be death, and bhaya is gonna be conveying fear, right? So if you look at the meaning, it says one's own duty, even though not glamorous, right, is better than duty alien to one's growth. So meaning doing a duty of someone else, which is paradharma. And then he says, for even death in doing one's duty leads to one's good, while a duty alien to one's own growth is burdened with the fear of downfall. So if we look at it, swadharma is one's own duty, right? So swadharma means duty that arises from, let's say, your own nature, your role in life, your duties and abilities. So our like our position right now are like students, right? So that would be our duty, right? To study and so on. But for Arjuna, his swadharma is that of a kshatriya, right? So Krishna is saying, even if you perform your duty imperfectly, right, it is still better than doing someone else's role perfectly, right? So and then the question might come up, then why is doing someone else's duty dangerous, right? Then you can think that when someone abandons his own nature, right, or his or her own nature and role, they create this inner conflict and disorder, right? So, at like, let's say, probably not the best example, but let's say a teacher trying to live like a warrior, right? Um, and or like a thinker forcing themselves into some kind of like leadership spot they're not suited for, right? This results in some kind of fear or instability or confusion, right? Then Sri Krishna, that's why Sri Krishna says, Paradharma bhaya bhaya. It's like doing another person's duty brings danger. Like, let's say I'm not trained to be a doctor, right? But like, I'm some kind of engineer, like, I'm an engineer, right? But if you tell me to do a surgery right now, that is going to be like, I'm going to be in a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear and confusion, right? Because that is not my duty. I'm not trained for that role, right? So you could think it's something like that. But so we saw so far that Arjuna does want to avoid fighting the war, but Sri Krishna keeps on telling him, it's your role as a Kshatriya, you are a warrior, avoiding a battle, living like someone who has renunciated everything. That would be someone else's path, not yours. So even if he dies in battle, right, by fulfilling his duty, is spiritually better than abandoning it. Okay? So in short, it is better to follow your own path imperfectly than to perfectly follow someone else's path. Does that make sense? Right? So, yeah. That is like the surface level understanding of this verse for now. Do you guys have any questions? Comments? Anything to discuss? No? Okay. Then we can move on. So, verse 36. Now, hold on. Do I chant this? Yes, I do. So verse 36. So now we have Arjuna speaking for one verse, and then we go back to Sri Krishna. So Arjuna is asking a question here. Arjuna yuvacha atakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha anichana pivarshenya baladivani yojita अतकेन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पुरुषः अनिच्छनपि वर्षेण्य बलदेव नियोजितः अतकेन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पुरुषः अनिच्छनपि वर्षेण्य बलदेव नियोजितः.
Okay. So here Arjuna's talking, so he's going to be talking to Sri Krishna. So here, Varshnava sign of the Vrishni race. Atha then ayam purusha, man, anichanapi, even unwillingly, prayukta, prompted, balad, by force, niyojitaha, compelled to, papam, sin, and charati, indulges in. So Arjuna's asking a pretty interesting question. It's also a very valid question because he's asking, what is that, O sign of the Vrishni race, prompted by which a man is forced, as it were, to indulge in sin even against his will? So he's asking here, if, say, for example, someone doesn't want to sin, but they're being forced to against his will, what happens to that person? And you can connect that back to like Arjuna's like situation, because like he doesn't want to sin, he doesn't want to like fight his family and his relatives, because he knows that if he fights them, they're going like on both sides there's going to be casualties, people are going to die, and that's a big sin. But his duty kind of forces him to do that. So Arjuna is asking a question about his situation, but also he asks the question for all of us, that if we're forced to sin, if we're forced to do something wrong, like against our own will, what happens to that person? So Sri Krishna is going to answer that in the next few verses. So let's go to verse 37.
It's actually a very good question if you
Yeah,
think
very
so.
good question. Yeah. But yeah. So we'll go to verse 37 and we'll see Sri Krishna's response. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidhena Miha Vairinam. Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidhena Miha Vairinam. Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vidhena Miha Vairinam.
Okay, so we start. This is a verse that we talk about often. um, so it's really interesting. You kind of see the progression and the source of where it all starts from. So it's really good that Oshiri kind of reviewed Kama, Krodha, like the six enemies, right? You kind of see the direct relationship here. So it says, first of all, if you want to go through a few words, it's Rajoguna Samudbhava, meaning it is born from of Rajoguna, okay? And then Kama is of course lust, or sometimes we say like desire, right? And then Krodha, anger. Um, and then Mahashana is insatiable. Papma is causes of great sin. And then he says Vairinam as enemy and Vidhis, no. Okay? So Iha. Also when he says Iha, he's saying like in this matter, meaning in terms of one's spiritual life. Okay? So in total, he says it is lust, it is anger, born of Rajaguna, insatiable and prompting men to do great sin. Know this to be the enemy in man's spiritual life. So Sri Krishna explains that the real enemy is what? Desire or lust, kama, right? So Sri Krishna says that the force pushing people toward wrong actions is this desire. So when we say desire, we're saying what? Like this intense craving, or like this attachment to like pleasure, power, or like some sort of results, right? So when this desire becomes really strong, it actually controls the mind, right? So instead of us controlling the mind, we become a slave to the mind. So, and then when these desires are blocked, like you're like, oh, I'm not gonna do this, right? I don't want to fulfill, like, you tell the mind, whatever you're thinking, I don't want, right? When you do that, your desires are blocked, right? And now then you get frustrated, and this transforms into anger, krodha. Do you see how it builds? So first you have these desires, this kama, but you say even if you try to suppress them, it then becomes into krodha. So let's say someone strongly wants to success, right? But then they fail, then they become really angry or resentful, right? So Sri Krishna shows a clear chain here. You can draw this out, like write it out. From desire, then you get some kind of like like you can say frustrations, right? Then you have anger, which then leads to these harmful actions, right? And then he says, so in as we have talked about previously, Prakriti has three qualities, right? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, right? And he specifically says desire and anger arise mainly from Rajas, right? So the restlessness, the craving aspect of the mind. And then he says, Sri Krishna calls desires Mahashana, meaning all consuming, right? It is never satisfied. So when it says insatiable, it's like it's never satisfied. Okay? And then he says Mahapapma, it's greatly sinful. So this in total it means that desire keeps growing, and the more it is fed, right? So it's like fire. Like the more you add fuel, it burns more and more. So in total, if you want to take a key part away from this part, is Krishna is telling Arjuna that the true enemy is not other people. But in reality, the true enemy is this uncontrolled kama and krodha within the mind, right? And then he warns us that know this to be the enemy in our spiritual life. So make sure you keep these two under control. Kind of a scary warning, but yeah. Okay. Are you guys good with this verse? Yes? So if we ask you, like, let's say, what are two things born out of Rajaguna that are harmful to one's spiritual life? Can you tell us? Or even if we say, can you draw the, like, some kind of chain reaction? Like, what we did with previous verses with, like, the rainfall and all that. You could do the same with this verses. Okay, next verse then. Verse 38. Okay, so he gives examples here. So he says, Dhumena vriyate bhanir yata darsho malena cha yatulbena vrito gharbas tata tene damavritam dhumena vriyate bhanir yata yata darsho malena cha yatulbena vrito gharbas tata tene damavritam धूमेना व्रियते वाणीर् यथा दर्शो मलेन च यतोल्बेन वृतो गर्भस्तथा तेनेदमवृतम्.
So in this verse, these are just examples that Sri Krishna is presenting to kind of understand, like little analogies to understand what he's really trying to say. So here it says Vani, fire, Dhumena by smoke, Adarshamolena cha, and mirror by dirt. Avriyate is enveloped, Garbha embryo, Ulbena by the placenta, Abrita covered, Tatha thus, Idam by this knowledge, Tena by that lust, Avritam is covered. So as fire is enveloped by smoke, mirror by dirt, and the embryo by the placenta, so is knowledge overcast by lust. So this idea of desire or lust, that kind of over like envelopes the idea of knowledge. So it's like we've talked about this idea of like the veil of ignorance, right? So if you think about it, it's like the ignorance is like some sort of like blanket, and you're like covering like whatever knowledge that you have. So that's what Sri Krishna is trying to say here. It's that this idea of lust, this what comes from lust is like desire, and then from desire comes anger, like that cycle that eventually just overlaps the idea of knowledge. So when you get angry, that's why normally you like go off of instinct instead of actually thinking it through and like using your knowledge. And that's something that we're all kind of guilty of. So it's understandable, but here it's a good example of how this idea of desire and lust covers this the knowledge that we're supposed to have. Okay, so we'll go to verse 39 then. Avritam jnanametena jnanina nityavairina kamarupena konteya dushpurena nalena cha. Avritam jnanametena jnanina nityavairina kamarupena konteya dushpurena nalena cha. Avritam jnanametena jnanina nityavairina kamarupena konteya dushpurena nalena cha.
Okay. So this builds off of the previous verse. So do you guys have the examples that Sri Krishna gave in the previous verse in mind? So fire enveloped by smoke. You can try to kind of imagine this. Like imagine a fire being enveloped by smoke, and then a mirror covered by dirt. Like imagine this, right? Like these are things you have seen. And if you have studied some sort of biology, you definitely know the next one. Embryo by a placenta. I was really surprised when I read this for the first time. I was like, oh my god, this is so scientific, right? But it makes so perfect sense in this context. So an embryo by a placenta. The placenta covers the embryo, right? And so these are the three examples he gives, right? And then keeping this in mind, he says, knowledge, right? He's referring to knowledge to, O son of Kunti, which is Arjuna. And he says, knowledge is covered by this eternal foe of the aspirant after knowledge, the insatiable fire of lust. So the person who is aspiring for this knowledge, right? This ultimate knowledge, that knowledge is covered up by this in like this fire of lust. So if you kind of break it down, once again, he's saying desire covers knowledge. So Sri Krishna is saying that wisdom already exists in a person, right? But desire hides it. So once again, our nature is Sachidananda, right? Like it's all it's not, but that knowledge is covered up by ignorance, right? And so that's kind of what Sri Krishna is trying to refer here. So he says, desire is nitya vairina, right? A constant enemy. So if you break these words up, it's like an eternal enemy. And he says, but then he explains why. Because desires, they keep returning, right? And then they grow stronger if uncontrolled. And then they distract the mind from wisdom and self-control. So even a wise person should stay alert against these. And then once again, he compares desire to a fire, right? That can never be fully satisfied. So just like as I said before, just like a fire, the more fuel you add, the bigger it grows, right? So fulfilling one desire often creates more desires. So if you think about it, we're like, oh, this is my goal, right? And then we're like, I'll be satisfied once I get into this school. I'll be satisfied once I get this job. I'll be satisfied after this. But you're never satisfied. There's always another goal, right? After that. So in that way, the more you feed to this not in this context, but like the more you feed this desire of yours, the bigger it grows. The more there is after that, right? So it connects very nicely to the previous verse, like the past few verses, because desire and anger causes wrongdoing, right? And then because desire covers wisdom, it prevents this sort of clear thinking, right? As or she was saying that we kind of go off of our instincts. So once again, it just kind of summarizes that desire is a powerful force that hides the wisdom and kind of drives people away from right action. And then it's like fire that's never fully satisfied. So if you think about it, like when people are really angry, they say some things, right? And then when they like calm down, they think about what they have said and they like sometimes regret what they said, right? They're like, I was not thinking when I said that. Like it happens very often and it's very normal in people's life if you think about it, right? So but Sri Krishna warns us greatly in these few verses that we should be aware that it all's the source is kama and krodha, right? And it leads to these consequences. Okay. Um Next verse. Okay. This would have been the ending, but there's 3 more verses, so we wanted a clean finish. So, Indriyani manobuddhir Indriyani manobuddhir Ashyadhishthanamuchyate Eter vimohayate jnanamavrittadehinam Indriyani manobuddhir Ashyadhishthanamuchyate Eter vimohayate jnanamavrittadehinam Indriyani manobuddhir ashyadhishthanamuchyate etarvimohayatyesha jnanamavrittadehinam.
So in this verse, Sri Krishna, again, he's building on these verses so you can understand that he provides the examples, explains it, further explains it. So you're going to see that in verse 40 as well. So Indriyani, senses, mano, mind, buddhi, intellect, adhishtanam, seat, uchate, spoken of, esha, this lust, etai, by these organs, jnanam, knowledge, avritya, veiling, dehinam, embodied spirit, vimohayati, deludes. So the senses, the mind, and the buddhi are said to be at sea. With these, it veils knowledge and deludes the embodied spirit. So this idea of lust and desire, it comes from the senses and your mind and like what you choose, right? So the senses, say for example, you really want something, right? That's your senses telling you like, oh, like say like you really want this like game or you really want this toy, right? The senses are telling you, yes, I want this. The mind keeps thinking about it. It keeps thinking like, oh, I really want this game. I really want this toy. And the buddhi is like set, saying that yes, this is the thing that I want. So that's where this desire is coming from. And that's where Sri Krishna says the senses, the mind, and the buddhi are said to be its seat. That's like the foundation of your desire to sit on in order for it to start. And with this combination, it veils knowledge and it deludes the embodied spirit. So it just further reinforces that this idea of desire and lust, it covers the knowledge. It like makes the mirror dirty. And as an example that Sri Krishna gave. Okay. So let's go to verse 41. We're almost done. There's 43 verses, so Tasmat tvamindriyanyaddo niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahihenam jnana vijnana nashanam. तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भारतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहिहेरम् ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम् तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भारतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहिहेरम् ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्.
Okay, verse 41. So he kind of like puts it together now. He says, therefore, O Scion of Bharatares, controlling the senses at the beginning itself, slay this foul enemy, the destroyer of all knowledge and realization. So Sri Krishna says to Arjuna that as a solution to the problem of desires discussed in the past few verses, right, in depth, he gives Arjuna the solution, right? So he says the first step is controlling the senses. Okay? And then he says these senses include sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, right? And desires often enter through the senses when we become attached to what we're seeing or experiencing, right? So it's interesting. There's a verse that says these are the doors to hell. I'm forgetting. But if you read that, you know what I'm referring to. But so like let's say you see something like very nice, right? That and your desire rises. Like let's say you see, I don't know, a really nice video game. I don't know, and then all of a sudden your desire is like, oh, I really want that, right? So Sri Krishna advises discipline these senses, control your senses, because right, these are the first things that kind of experience the outer stuff. So you need to control these. So and then he says, destroy. He says desires to destroy the knowledge and wisdom, right? So he's saying desire destroy the jnana, meaning the knowledge or understanding, and the vijnana, the deeper wisdom or like this realization, right? So this means that desire clouds our judgment and then also weakens our self-control as well. And in result prevents clear thinking. So this instruction is very practical. And then Sri Krishna's message is not simply to suppress everything, but also to regulate the senses, remain self-aware, and kind of prevent these desires, right? But then he says, slay this foul enemy. So cut it off, right? Because this destroys our knowledge and our realization. So he's giving very practical advice here. He's saying control the senses at the beginning itself, right when they come up, right? Because once they're uncontrolled, then your senses, if you just let your senses be out there, they will just feed your desires. And once the desires become uncontrollable, then it just grows and grows and eventually destroys your wisdom. Okay? Awesome. Next verse. Also, please don't draw on the screen. Okay, my turn to chant. Indriyani pranyahur indriyebhya param mana manashastu para buddhir yo buddhi paratastu sa. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param mama mana manashastu para buddhir yo buddhi paratastu saha. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param mana manashastu para buddhir yo buddhi paratastu saha.
So here, Indrayani, the senses, Parani, great, Indriyebhya, Param, superior to the senses, Mana is the mind. Manashatu, then even the mind, para, superior, buddhi is the intellect. Yahu, tu, even, buddhe, then intellect, parata, superior, sa is he, the Atman. So the senses are great, they say. Superior to the senses is the mind, and superior even to that mind, even to the mind is the intellect. What is superior even to the intellect is he, the Atman. So here you can see kind of this cycle, not necessarily a cycle, it's like just what is more stronger, what is more superior to one another. So you have the senses, you start off like at the lowest level, and then above that is your mind, and then above that is your buddhi, and then superior to that, more powerful than that, is the Atman, which is the spirit which is in everyone. Okay? So now we'll go to the last verse, verse 43. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanamaatmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durashadam. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanamaatmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durashadam. Evam buddhe param buddhva samsthabhyatmanamaatmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durashadam.
Okay, final verse of the chapter. So, oh, also one thing, when you're chanting the full chapter, chant the last verse twice, and then you do Om Tat Saditi, okay? And maybe we could go over this, or sure, like if you do part of a chapter, you say Ekang Shinam, and then if you do the full thing, you don't say anything, okay? We'll go over that after this. But so last verse of the chapter, so Sri Krishna kind of puts everything together in the second to last in this verse. So he says here, thus knowing him who is superior to even the buddhi and controlling the lower self with the higher, kill that tough enemy in the form of lust, O mighty armed Arjuna. So here Sri Krishna says, like in the previous verse, Sri Krishna explains the hierarchy of human being, right? The senses, the mind, the intellect, and then like the Atman, right? So you could draw this like if we were to say, oh, draw like a chain or like some kind of like chronological order of some sort, you could say what builds off of what. So Sri Krishna says in the previous verse, the self is the highest and most powerful of all of this and this like level, right? And then here Sri Krishna is saying, use that higher parts of yourself to control the lower ones. So you could think the process kind of looks like the self, like the Atman, they guide the intellect, right? And then the intellect controls the mind, and then the mind controls the senses, right? Do you see, like, you kind of going backwards? So Sri Krishna says, know who is the superior one, even to the buddhi, which is what? The Atman, right? According to the previous verse. And now he's saying control the lower self with the higher. So you can kind of think that, like, if you go from the top down, the Atman is controlling the buddhi, right? The buddhi is controlling the mind, and the mind controls the senses. Do you guys understand, like, the logic here? He's saying control the lower self with the higher, right? And then once again, Sri Krishna is warning us that the real enemy is kama, lust, right? In the form of lust, right? He's saying you must conquer it. And it is very difficult to conquer, actually, because it constantly returns, and it could also kind of like disguise itself in various different forms, right? And once again, it distracts the mind from the wisdom, the knowledge. And so only by realizing the higher self, can we overcome it? So all in all, in the in this like chunk of verses, like from like Arjuna's question till now, from like 37ish to like 43, Sri Krishna is saying that desire causes wrongdoing. Do you remember what was Arjuna's initial question? Do you guys remember? He says, "O Skion of the like, O Krishna, prompted by what is a man forced to indulge in sin even against his will?" Right. So what forces one person to do sin against his own will? And Sri Krishna answers it through the past few verses, but here in the last verse he says, "You must kill this enemy in the form of lust." So, and he tells you the solution too, right? He answers your question, like what is the issue, and then he gives you the solution. So by realizing the higher self and using reason and discipline, a person can overcome this powerful enemy slash foe called kama, lust. Okay? Awesome. So that concludes chapter 3, guys. Okay. Exciting, exciting. Third chapter done. So we're what, 1/6 of the way through, if you want to think about it like that. But it's never like that. Honestly, you could spend all your lifetime on every single one of these verses. So at least in terms of chanting, in terms like in the way I think about it, it's like you get kind of exposure to like chanting because that's the thing. So yeah, your homework will be the 13th verse.
So
This is gonna be fun, guys, or it might just backfire.
let's see. So we have 4 teams.
Yes, team 1 is asking to. Okay, okay.
Four.
Team 1 is asking to team 4. So go ahead. Team 1, present your question.
How might a person's life change if they did their actions without ego or desire and focused only on doing their duty?
So, what what our group thinks that the answer to that is that what will end up happening is they
Charlotte,
will.
put the question in the chat. It's for the rest of us. But keep on going on, girl.
No, I want to see the question again. I just want to see something really quickly. while
Yes,
looking at the
that
question.
yeah. Can you just quickly type it in the chat, Orca? I mean, Charlotte. So for the rest of the groups, that's why I was saying put it in the chat or put it on a slide so the rest of us can see it because sometimes it's hard to retain the question. But and also whoever group it's being asked to, like not one person but like multiple person can jump in. So it's not like a one person game. Are
Yeah,
you
you
saying?
guys can build off of like what your teammate says.
Mm-hmm. Do you have are you typing it, Charlotte? Okay. The question's in the chat. How might a person's life change if they did their action without ego or desire and focused on doing duty?
So, what I was trying to say was that if they focus on their duty, they will. Oh, what?
Keep on
So,
talking.
so what will end up happening is that their life will change because of if they do their duty, like how it says in it says in verse 35. It says that if someone does their own duty, even if it's not the greatest one, like even if it is bringing like trash out into the street or something like that, it's better than doing something that is glamorous and not getting it, because it says here that if you do something that is not your duty and you think that you're supposed to do that, you're technically incurring sin. But if you do your own duty, you will not incur sin and you will end up attaining the supreme, and their life will change because they will attain God and get released from the bondage of karma.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone else want to add on? From group 4?
I think Argo answered it well, and I probably can refer to one verse that we were talking about that could possibly be an answer to this. It would be I think it was verse 30. It was verse 40, where it says ego or desire can be rooted from senses, or the mind, and in verse 40 it talks about how the senses and the mind are pretty much the seat that like prevents somebody's knowledge from standing up. So essentially, if somebody were to do their actions without eager desire, they're able to fully unlock the potential of their knowledge.
Yep, that sounds good. So are you guys good? For the rest of the people on the call, do you guys feel like the question was answered?
Yeah.
Okay. Group 2 gets to ask their question too.
Let's see. I just realized you can't hear the sound of the wheel, so now you guys should be.
We can. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, team 3 it is. I love how it's working out, right? Okay. Team 2 asks to team 3.
Wait, so just one question we ask?
Yes.
Okay.
Put it in the chat if you guys could, that'd be great.
All right. So one of our questions is, what is born from Rajaguna and how does it stop one from liberating themselves from bondage or desire?
This is the question.
No, that's the other question we're gonna ask. Not that one.
So you want to ask the second question?
Yes.
Okay. This is the second question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, group 3.
We're answering the second question, correct?
Yes, this one, the one on
Okay,
that's
okay.
on the screen.
Okay, got it. So, so Krishna says that desire and anger, so kama and krodha, are born from the Rajaguna. And it makes people want to constantly want things always, so you're always having some desire for like power or success. And when these desires, when you're not getting these desires, it in turn becomes a chain of turning into anger. So it stops a person from being free because it creates attachment and just constant craving. The person becomes stuck kind of chasing what they want always, and because of the frustration the mind stays restless. So it stops one from being free from bondage is because they're constantly wanting something, we feel like, and they're not being able to maintain self-discipline. I think that's a very important thing, and you're not able to have control over the mind and senses. I believe that's it. And then anyone else from team 3 want to add in?
I feel like Srishti basically kind of summed it up, but like to add on, like it could be like I feel like these strong emotions kind of keep a person attached to like the outcomes, and kind of like selfish actions, which kind of like creates a bondage instead of like you know your spiritual growth. So yeah.
Right. So they kind of just remain stuck in a cycle of actions and reactions, as Shudipta said. And also, additionally, just to say, the verse that would answer this question is verse 37 in chapter 3. And yeah, it talks about the anger and how Rajaguna is prompting man to like greater sin. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel that answered the question.
Awesome. So it looks like both sides were satisfied with the answers. Group 3. Okay. Group 3 will ask group 2.
Wait, shouldn't all the groups be able to ask each other? Wait, why are we removing the teams if we're like moving on to one group each time?
Say that one more time.
So like, if since group three is asking a question, why are they losing the opportunity to like ask group four a question, group one a question?
You guys want to ask
You want
everyone?
us to do that?
No, but like it sounds more. You know what? No, it's fine this way. I was
No,
just
no.
curious.
Oh, no, no. It was just like you could like ask a group, but like if you wanted to ask the whole everyone, we could also do that.
No, no, that's fine. It's fine. That's just a question I had.
Okay. We
We
can
can do it next
continue.
time
Yeah, next time.
if we do questions again. But in the meantime, group 3, you can ask team 2 a question.
I'll put the questions in the chat. I think number one is actually something that we answered, so they have the option to choose between two and three, whichever one they like.
Do we answer like either two of the three or just either one of the three?
Whichever one you feel most comfortable with.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'll answer question three. Controlling the mind and practicing self-discipline was important for long-term goals because it allows us to essentially have control over our mind and sense objects. Essentially, we are no longer in control of them, but therefore we are in control of our desire rather being a servant to it. So we're not attached or bound to anything by desire and anger. So any examples in real life? Say you are studying for some sort of exam, but you have the desire to do anything else, but having control over your mind to focus on your current duty would allow you to better gain fruits of studying. And a verse that could probably answer this would be verse 42, which explains the chain of command that senses are inferior to mind, mind is inferior to intellect, but intellect is inferior to the Atman, which is the true self, which is what we truly are. So therefore, being able to truly control ourselves would be beneficial in the long term for fulfilling goals and being above bondage. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that answers the question. Thank you.
Okay. So last but not least, group 4 can ask group 1.
So, our question for group 1 is in verse 32, what doctrine is Krishna referring to?
Wait, could you type in chat or like say it again?
Okay.
So the doctrine Krishna is referring to, I think what he means by that is Krishna is like saying that people who reject or criticize this teaching about selfless action and devotion are blind to wisdom and spiritual lust because they refuse to follow the path that leads to freedom than from karma, if that makes sense. I think that.
Does that answer the question? What do you guys think? Okay, so what do you, Griffor? Are you like? Do you guys want to add something to what you were initially thinking about the question, or no?
And also, we want to ask another question. I think which is a little easier than this one.
Okay.
So our second question is, in verse 37, Sri Krishna mentions that lust and anger lead to great sin. What are the qualities of a person that is able to counteract this sin? I'm putting it in chat.
So the qualities of a person that can counteract lust and anger can probably be like self-control, discipline over their actions, strong intellect, and awareness of their higher self. And I believe that these qualities I just said could definitely like help them overcome like lust, anger, and avoid like being led to sin.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because in the last few verses, Sri Krishna definitely talks about this, right? He was like, know him to the one who's superior, controlling the lower self with the higher. And he was saying controlling the senses at the beginning itself, by like verse 41 to 43 ish. So, yeah, that does answer the question. So, did you guys like this way better than the slides? Yes. Um, it would definitely be better if it was in person, because then everyone would have to speak. But I think we gave it a try. So, do you guys want to go back to slides or keep this? Because if you guys don't answer, then we have no way of knowing. Alternate. Don't prefer slides.
Like alternating, like we could do one day we could do slides.
Yeah, we could do that. That's always an option, yes. Because I feel like sometimes it's just like Oshiri and I do go through the meaning of the verses, and it might get redundant on your end. So, or another thing we can do is that we could give one overarching question to all the groups, and you guys all answer, and then we can come back together and discuss. That's something else we can do. Yes, all the three.
Um, how about we how about we do what we did today on in-person classes so it's easier to like talk and like actually understand. And then we do the slideshows in on Zoom. So because like it's easier like that.
Hmm. We can do that. Um. So, um, anyways, yeah, we could do that totally. And also, do you guys miss online classes? I mean, in-person classes or online All good? Okay. Because at least for the next 2 weeks, we'll be online. So that's for sure. So even though I do, it gets a bit hectic on my end with school and everything to send out the email earlier in the week. Although I can do it this week because since I'm on break. But just know that we have classes, but they're all online. So if someone else is confused, please let them know. Got it? Yeah, I think that concludes today's class, chapter 3 as well. Um, I will make sure if we should review chapter 3, continue chapter 4. We haven't touched chapter 4 in a long time for Oshiri and my end. We haven't like officially ever done chapter 4 in our classes, but I will check in with that. So, yeah, we could. Do you guys want to review or do you guys want to start a new chapter? Up to you guys, to an extent. Just so I can convey your end. Do you guys want to start a new chapter or review this chapter? Like we could do the thing where we did it with all the verses. Review would be good. Okay. Yeah, I will let them know. And also, Uncle says hi to all of you. He says he misses all of you. Yeah. So he told me to relay the message to the rest of you guys in class. So I'll let him know what you guys want to review or start a new chapter, and we can do that for the next class. Yeah. No, thank you guys for being here, and we can do the concluding prayer, and we can conclude today's class. Who wants to do concluding prayer too? Go ahead, Oshani. She's all for it.
Bhumi Mangalam Udakamangalam Agni Mangalam Payumangalam Gagana Mangalam Shriya Mangalam Chandra Mangalam Deha Mangalam Mono Mangalam Jiba Mangalam Atma Mangalam Sarva Mangalam Bhavatu Sarva Mangalam Bhavatu Om Shanti Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Rama Paramastu.
Om Shanti Sri Mar Charanarpanamastu. Thank you guys. So yeah, we will be back online for next week's class, and we'll see what happens from there. Thank you all for being here. And we're still kind of trying out what is best for the second half of class, but we can go off. We can play it by ear again next week. So yeah. Thank you.
Bye, you guys. See you next week.